Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Knicks Film School film session. Ben Ritholtz here, coming at you on a Thursday night. The Knicks coming off a miraculous win in Portland, the Mikal Bridges day and game winner, and the team we're about to face, the Golden State Warriors, coming off their own win, another win, a team that is on absolute fire right now secure in the sixth spot, I believe, in the West, climbing their way out of the play-in and into the playoffs, a very dangerous basketball team. And I have a very special guest on to talk it through with me. This coming a rematch with the Warriors after a loss last weekend. The Knicks did not look very good against the Warriors. The Warriors continue to play really good basketball, and now without Jalen Brunson should be a challenge, but it should be fun. So to break down the Golden State Warriors, to me, the best who is doing it, one of the best film analysts we have, certainly on Twitter, but I think in any basketball discourse that you'll find, is Joe Viray. So honored that he's on with me to break down some film from the previous game and then preview the upcoming matchup. So with that, let's get to it. Joe, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you for that intro. I appreciate all the kind words, and I'm excited to talk about the Knicks, the Warriors. Both teams who have had fairly decently successful seasons, and the Warriors are rolling. Unfortunately for them, also is the rest of the middle of the pack of the West. So, one small mistake, one loss is enough to vault them right back into play-in. So the game against the Knicks is pretty big because the Wolves, they're not looking like they're losing anytime soon with that schedule. And the rest of the West is just so tough this year. And it's the Thunder and then everyone else. And then everyone else is winning as of late, same time as the Warriors started winning. So Steph Curry, inspirational player, as they say, but and he just drilled his 4,003 of the night. So,
I saw
legendary career.
It's such a crazy number, and we're going to dive into the actual film, but that number stops me in my tracks. To think that this guy revolutionized basketball now over a decade ago, and you'd think that we know the game has changed, and he has a large part of that, of the game changing around him and the way players shoot now. But to think that he's still so far and beyond the best shooter in the league, despite the fact that we're talking about 10, 11 years ago when this all started. And to me, that's one of the craziest aspects of this is game's changed. He's still there's no one even close to him in terms of volume, accuracy from 3-point line, and what that obviously creates. And we're going to get to it, what that creates in terms of how defenses struggle to guard him. But man, 4,000 threes is an incredible number. I mean, just what do you think about when you hear that?
To me, the most amazing thing about Steph is, sure, he revolutionized the game in terms of everyone shooting threes now. Everyone's basing their offense off of what good looks can we generate from the 3-point line, and how can we play off of that. The amazing thing to me is when most of the people who kind of discover or revolutionize the concept, they become kind of old-fashioned eventually as the years go by. The game passes them by. Steph, he's still as effective as ever. Even if he's 37, he's turning 37 years old tomorrow, and he's not as quick, he's not as athletic as he was when he was young. Defense is they still defend him like he can destroy a game in a matter of seconds, in a matter of minutes. So the Kings earlier, they were top blocking the heck out of him. They did not want him to get open on the perimeter. And, they did that at the expense of letting a Draymond or a GP2 take threes. And they made their threes. And, having Jimmy there also helps in the sense that he can calm things down. The Warriors kind of get panicked if they can't find Steph.
Yeah.
And Jimmy's there to kind of calm things down, find the open man. But everything still revolves around Steph. The Warriors still revolve around Steph heavily. And, when he's gone, I don't know. I mean, for one, the Warriors won't be the same team, obviously, but also, the game won't be, I don't know, the game, like, to me, it won't be as exciting. Like, we say that all the time about generational players, like X players, like when he's gone, the game won't be as fun anymore. And for Steph, I think, there's going to be something he'll leave behind that won't be replicated by anyone else.
It's a great segue, Joe, because I want to talk about some play, maybe the classic play that the Warriors have run for Steph Curry. I think since Steve Kerr took over, you'll tell me, and you'll name it for me the way you always do and break down exactly how it all works. But this play, this is one where I actually don't think the Knicks defended it all that poorly. I just think it's almost an impossible play to guard the way the Warriors execute it. So I'm going to run it through here. Draymond's got the ball, kind of the short corner on the right side, and he's going to pass it out to Quentin Post. And I see, watch Steph Curry there with the point, right? So with that point, Joe, you tell me if I'm wrong. He's basically saying, hey, toss it to Draymond, and we're going to run what? You fill in the blank for me.
Yeah, we're going to run split action. So it's basically like if there's the most obvious tell in history that, hey, and their play call for it is actually just, in general, it's just, hey, point to the post, whoever's on the post, point, and then we're going to run split action. Yeah. There's like 10 years worth of film to where they're pointing to the post, hey, feed it down there, and then set the screen, I'm going to come off you. And that's basically it. That's the simple setup of a split action. 10 years hasn't changed.
Yeah, and then they run a lot of split action, but it's this particular one that I feel like I've seen a gazillion times, which is the one where Steph's coming often to this right side. I feel like they run it out of ATOs also a lot, where they'll set it up exactly in this formation. You tell me if I'm wrong, but it's basically just get Steph kind of running off the screen. And as he comes off, you see Quentin Post does a good job there of like a little shove on Precious right? So basically saying, Precious, you're not going to be able to get up on Steph. So Mikal's got to obviously chase over the top. It's Steph Curry, for God's sake. Draymond's got the ball, and Hart, you can already kind of looking at it. He knows what's coming, right? But what's he supposed to do about it? Because once Curry gets this ball, if Hart tries to get out real quick, it's a quick pocket pass to Draymond, right? Like we've seen that a million times as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned the little shove that Post does to Precious before he comes off. And who else does that? It's Kevon Looney. It's Draymond when he's the one setting the screen. So, Post, he's a quick learner. Like, he's been absorbing all the information that Draymond's been feeding him. So, to see him do that right away, like in his rookie season where he does the little, you could be, that's a foul, but those are the little tricks of the game where, just test the ref, test the officials, see if they call it. If they don't, then
come on, Joe. Golden State's not getting called for any screen fouls. We know this. This is 10 years in the making.
Yeah. I mean, tricks of the game. You got to know the tricks of the game, right? I mean, if you're not called for it, then you keep doing it until you are, right? So, but yeah, I mean, like when people see sessions like this one, and then they wonder why, like in this case, Precious is like playing drop, or bigs, they don't bother going up on screens. Then like there's a part of it where I think they should make a more concerted effort to step up, but it's also those tricks that we just discussed where you make it easier for Steph. Like anything you can do to make it easier, you kind of push the boundaries of the rules, maybe.
Yeah, even Draymond here with his Draymond with his left arm here as Steph's going up, right? He's got a little hold of Hart. I mean, this is what Draymond does so well, right? The little knocks that'll open Steph up. Well, what's interesting is that because it's Post that's setting that screen there as well, and he's actually a shooter, right? So Precious has to think twice because Mikal's going to get over the top really hard here. He's not going to switch this. And so Precious has to, in the back of his mind, if I commit, I'm probably conceding an open three to Post. So maybe that's also why he doesn't commit. But I think he probably has to do a better job of at least getting up a little bit, even after the shove. But tough play to guard, man. Just a tough play to guard. And even that, it's not a bad pass by Mikal. It's just a ridiculous shot.
Like even then, like the shot wasn't that open. Yeah.
No. No. All right. So let's run to play two. So this is an inbounds play the Warriors ran. Is this a setup that you see often from them, or a tell about what play they're going to run here?
Yeah, this is what they call rub. Like
Okay.
Steve Kerr rubs his chest and then he calls it out. And often what happens is either like the one in Jimmy, the one in Pods' position, the inbounder, he sets the screen typically for the one in the corner who is Jimmy. So it's typically a screen going toward the rim, and either the ball is inbounded to, it's typically post in this position, but I think in this one I remember, post gets it and then he passes it off to Draymond. So it's kind of like a twist on their usual rub action where, the angle isn't there for a post because I think it's at Shamit. Yeah, Shamit is hugging him, so he kind of pushes him off to the 3-point line. So it's tough to get a better pass. And then so Draymond gets it. So I think this is a one where, and then Pod sets the screen.
This is like, and that's where Jimmy finishes. And this is like where I think Jimmy is so dangerous because you add him to this offense where it's not like, you add him to an offense that already was so movement heavy, and he's such a dangerous player off the ball. And one of the, when he's activated, and I think it's sometimes in Miami he wasn't, but when he's activated as a cutter, he's so scary. And the way it hurts the Knicks is because the Knicks have some small defenders, right? Where there are teams that can automatically switch this rub, and you may get something out of it, but they're gonna have to work a little bit harder for it because the Knicks have McBride guarding Podziemski here. And that's not a switch they're willing to do, especially because Jimmy's coming towards the rim and will post that switch, right? So they have to try to stay home or do as much as they can to OG to stay on Jimmy. And like you see OG trying to get around, and like Deuce just can't deal with that physicality down there. And like, is that something you've seen a lot from Jimmy in terms of like his off-ball movement, the way he's able to generate buckets and fouls that way?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Jimmy that impresses me the most is his positioning. Especially on those against switches like that, like this one. I don't think the Knicks intended to switch this one, but it's kind of like an emergency switch where McBride realizes like, hey, I mean, Jimmy's here. I got to switch on to him because OG's falling behind.
Yeah.
But then with emergency switches like these, you're like, you don't get to switch properly. You don't get to like get in front and on time. And with someone like Jimmy, who's just good at positioning himself topside like this one, underneath the rim, that's a tough guard for McBride. And Draymond too. He's like couple of like first few games with Jimmy, he was like I think it was experimentation because they kept turning the ball over on some of these lobs to Jimmy where the timing wasn't right, like the connection just wasn't there yet. But over the past few games, Draymond and Jimmy have perfected this where, Jimmy times the jump, Draymond gets the pass to where Jimmy's going to jump, and then it's perfect. I mean, and then the whole defense collapses. So I think it's like one of those things where they were working on from the get-go and they perfected it now. And Jimmy's just amazing. Like his positioning, his timing, his patience underneath the rim. I mean, I think it's been really fun to watch, and it's a godsend for the Warriors because their finishing hasn't been all that good pre-Jimmy. Their free throw shooting was really, really bad before Jimmy, and now they basically shot up to like the top of the list when it comes to both of those metrics.
Yeah, and the way he plays off 2 feet, I've heard Steve Kerr talk about it in post-game press conferences, like the way he plays off 2 feet, the pump fake game obviously is crazy good. And the way he can position himself on these off-ball cuts. And it's crazy because on one hand, you'd think, okay, Jimmy's not shooting threes. Draymond's not a shooter, really. I mean, I know he's made a couple and big ones in the last several games, but generally speaking, teams will live with it. How do you create a lineup that works with those two guys in it? And I think it's just a combination of they're so smart and such good off-ball players and screeners. And then you add like the gravity creator in all the league in Steph. And I think it just all works, even with those two non-shooters. Is that generally how you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, like on paper, Jimmy and Draymond, especially in the modern NBA, like two people who are either non-shooters, difficult time shooting the ball, or aren't willing to shoot, it shouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
Like, and the Warriors have had those configurations with Draymond and Kevon Looney, and it
Hmm.
worked in the past. But it's like nowadays, it's kind of tough to pair Looney and Draymond because, yeah, I mean, Looney isn't the same kind of player in the sense that he's not going to get to the rim at will. He's not going to be a good passer like Jimmy. And Jimmy's all of those things. And when you combine those two skill sets with Jimmy and Draymond, like they just know what to do with each other, and they know what to do with the rest of the people surrounding them. And I think that compensates for the shortcomings, which is the lack of spacing that they generate. And yeah, I mean, so far no team has been able to punish them in terms of that. And unless someone figures out a way to stop both of them on the floor, I think Warriors will keep rolling with it.
Absolutely. All right. I got one more of my clips, and we're going to head to yours. So again, we have what we call a split cut, right? This time on the other side of the floor. And Steph's not on the floor. So this is actually a Butler-Podziemski split. And man, what's so cool about this one is like Jimmy is reading this, right? So generally speaking, the two players will come together. There'll be a screen, and then there's a read out of that screen. But you see Jimmy kind of motion to Podziemski, so that OG's got to kind of think about this. Do I have to switch this? Do I have to watch out for Podziemski's jump shot? Payne's too high, so he's not going to be able to switch, and then he almost slips it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that's the stuff that Jimmy does, man. Like that is so freaking smart. Like, have you seen a lot of this since this game as well? Like Jimmy kind of slipping the split cuts.
Yeah. Like Jimmy has this, I don't know what it is. Like you could call it like a hypnosis effect where he always makes his man freeze enough for him to slip behind. And, OG's an excellent defender. And, you'd expect him to kind of like know what to do in this situation. But Jimmy just has this effect where no matter who's defending him, he can fool them into thinking, hey, is this going to be a switch? Is this going to be a stay home? What's Jimmy going to do? Is he going to stay put here at the point of the screen? And he just has that effect. And then he knows the timing. He knows when to slip.
Yeah.
He senses his man like slipping a bit, like, hey, this man isn't really paying attention to me. He's paying attention to whoever's coming off the screen. And most often it's Steph. But Pods here, like, yeah, Pods has been shooting the three well as of late, but he's not really someone like you should jump out around the split screen. Not in the same magnitude as Steph Curry.
Yeah. So this is where I think this is the point of emphasis. If I'm Tibbs going into this coming game against the Warriors, there were so many miscommunication breakdowns in this game, and just misreads of situations. An OG especially, like, yeah, it is a great cut by Jimmy. I think it's a brilliant cut by Jimmy. But like, I'm not sure why OG is so concerned about Podziemski coming off with Payne trailing him. Like, you just got to live with that, and then you can be a helper if he tries to drive it off of Jimmy. So I don't really understand what he's doing. And there's actually a play, I didn't pull this one, where OG gets backdoored in this area of the floor from Jimmy. I don't know if you remember it. It was one dribble towards Jimmy. OG's guarding him here, and Jimmy got a straight backdoor layup. And I'm like, why are you overplaying Jimmy out of? So the Knicks need to clean up a bunch of this stuff if they want to have a chance against this hot Warriors team, because it was not pretty in terms of like defensive focus, I thought, in the first game.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly some things that they need to clean up. And also, like, one of the clips I'll show later intrigued me in the sense of what they're willing to give up. And they did play like some intriguing coverages, I felt, that I'm going to point out later. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they'll play it differently, especially with different personnel. I mean, Cat's going to be there, obviously. But yeah, I mean, looking forward to what they'll do differently next time.
All right. It also helps that you had the two shooters the week. of that so that no one could really help
Yeah.
down with healed and post. All right. So now we're getting to Joe's clips. So this is the first one you sent me. Defensive. Let's get to some Warriors defense. So talk me through this as I run the tape.
Yeah. So the first thing you notice is Moody. You know,
Yes.
this was off an offensive rebound make by Moody, and then he runs back. He sprints back to pick up Jalen Brunson, and he immediately positions himself. He kind of ices Jalen Brunson. So when you ice him, you force him toward the sideline and away from the screen. And it's also interesting to note, Mikal.
Yeah. Sorry, just because the goal for Brunson here is to try to get Steph involved, right? So that's why Mikal's the screener. Yeah, and Moody's saying not going to happen. I'm gonna stay on you and force you baseline, right?
Yeah, basically just did that all night. Because you don't want Jalen to go middle. That's like I think I pointed out before that prior to this game, Mikal. I mean Jalen has only gone middle on pick and rolls, total around 6 times per synergy. He's gone left, he's gone right, but middle only a few times. So like most teams have been defending him away from the middle.
Yes.
And also because you don't want Steph to switch onto him here. And
I will say that Brunson just loves to reject screens. So he and Halliburton have been, I know last year they were the top 2 in terms of rejecting. I haven't looked at the stats this year. I would imagine they're near the top, if not the top again. Because he's so deceptive and he loves to fake towards the screen and then go away from it. So I think it's both how he's being defended and also his preference as well. But on this one, he has no choice, right? Because Moody's really forcing him to the side.
Yeah, and also another thing here, Draymond, he shows up early. He shows up really early, right here, and everyone else, Guy Santos. I think this is Buddy Hield.
Yeah, that's Buddy in the corner.
Yeah, Buddy in the corner. They all pinch in right away, and you know Guy here, he can pinch off because it's Josh Hart. It's Precious right there, and then on the weak side, that's a long skip pass to. Is that Deuce? I think that's Deuce.
Yeah, that's Deuce. Exactly. It's the only shooter here is essentially 2 passes away. And you can look for all of Brunson's greatness. If there's a weakness as compared to some of the great, primary initiators in the league, you talk about your Lukas and you talk about your LeBrons and you talk about even Tatum, right? The ability to, not right now, but generally speaking, skip pass over the top. Because of your height and your size, like Jalen can't even see it. Forget about make that pass. So you can load up early on him like this, especially if you have non-shooters on the floor like Hart and Precious, and take away everything, right? And that's, I think, a great job by the Warriors to do that.
Yeah, and Draymond here, he has all the license in the world to do this because in another situation, Precious here, this would be Cat, and instead of rolling and going straight down the middle of the lane, Cat would be staying put to right where Mikal is, like
right here,
to Mikal's left. To Mikal's left, he would be right here.
He would be stopping right here.
So that's what intrigues me in the upcoming matchup, because while they may not have the same level of on-ball creator left in Jalen, how much will they play the same types of coverages, no matter who the on-ball creator is? Like if it's Mikal, will they ice him like they did Jalen here? And, Draymond, if he's here, he's not going to be able to close out on time when it's Cat at the top of the key. And that's what intrigues me. Will they stay with the same coverages that they played, or will they do some adjustments? Because the Warriors, over the years that I've covered them, they're not exactly the best team when it comes to defending stretch fives, especially with Kevon Looney. Like Looney, if he has one big weakness, is ultimate kryptonite at stretch fives. And with Draymond, he does a bit better against stretch fives because he's more mobile. He can rotate quickly. He can get to the perimeter quickly. His closeouts are really, really quick, and then those long arms can bother shots. But Draymond also has tendencies where, he kind of sticks longer in the paint than he needs to, and then he just kind of gives up sometimes, or he's late in his closeouts toward the perimeter against stretch five. So I'm really curious as to how different of a dynamic Cat presents in possessions like this one.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question though, because I think probably the biggest story in the Knicks season over the last couple of months is the way that the wing on Cat and centers on Hart strategy has really wrenched the offense a little bit. And every team is now doing it. It was like some teams at the first half of the year and Hart was shooting better. And now it's become ubiquitous. Like every single team is stashing their center on Hart and putting their best wing defender on Cat. And it has definitely caused some issues for the Knicks. So do you see the Warriors do anything like that coverage wise? Like Draymond can guard Hart and basically have the same license, treat him like a non-shooter, and put, I don't know, Santos in this picture maybe on Cat, or maybe Kuminga now that he's back. You see anything like that? The Warriors going anything like that?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, in the last game, I think there were possessions where they put post on Hart, and they tried to put post in action by having Hart screen for Brunson. And
Yep.
I certainly think that something like that will happen this upcoming game.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I won't put switching off the table. Like,
Nope.
I think they'll try to test Cat's ability to work against a crowded, like being crowded out on the perimeter, trying to bully his way to the rim. I think they'd rather give that up than an open Cat 3. So they have a lot of tools in their disposal in terms of personnel and coverages. So I think for me, my fearless prediction will be they'll try switching more of those screens, those pick and pop possessions for Cat. And they'll try to see if Cat can beat them either bullying his way to the post or driving against a wing or a smaller defender, and try to test his on-ball creation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, this is an example here where like this probably needs to be a Hart 3. Like, most wing players in the league are shooting this ball, and it becomes kind of a record scratch, which is what we've been seeing a lot of. And teams are getting more and more aggressive in how they're treating him like that. And we end up with a okay look, not terrible, but not exactly the offensive possession you want, right?
Yeah.
All right. So to the next possession we go, the next of Joe's possessions. So now we got an offensive possession for the Warriors. We got a screen and roll between Jimmy and Pods, another Jimmy Pods connection. How about that?
Yeah.
So talk me through this one, Joe.
They do a lot of these early offense screens on the wing, like they call them the pistol screens.
Yep, pistol screens,
step-up screens, where they like having Jimmy be the screener, and the goal is to have whoever's defending the on-ball guys, usually a guard, switch onto Jimmy. That's the goal. And then Jimmy posts up, and then that's where he can create off of what the defense gives him. Like most of the time when he posts up against a smaller guard in the block, the defense overreacts to that. So it's either the low man pinches in, someone has to help the helper, and then someone on the weak side corner gets open, and that's often Quentin post. So he drifts to the corner, and then Jimmy passes it to him. And in this case, the Knicks didn't switch. So what they did was they had OG play drop. So it's not every day you see a non-big player drop coverage. And I've seen a lot of that before where they had Steph play drop coverage to prevent switches. I think it was in a playoff setting. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of related to what we were talking about earlier, where, what are they willing to give up? Like in terms of shot profiles. In this case, OG plays drop. Warriors try to screen again, but they don't get the switch, and ultimately they just Pods just settles with a midi, a floater that it's fairly defended, I would say, but Pods, he makes that shot, and I think the Knicks will live with that shot, and I don't think they'd be disappointed with the result. But yeah, I mean, I'm just interested in the kinds of shots the Knicks are willing to give up, and then the coverages they play, because like of all the limited viewings I've seen of the Knicks this season, they're kind of been shuffling through different things, because that's what a team tries to, like, who's been defensively struggling, tries to do. They don't have a base that they can rely on. They kind of like shuffle through different coverages. They try different things from like possession to possession, game to game. And, like as someone who's seen the Warriors go through that sort of thing the last couple of seasons, I kind of relate to the Knicks in the sense that they're kind of struggling to find an identity on that end.
Yeah,
and
they're searching.
It's wild to say that of a team coached by Thibs, right? Like,
yeah, it's funny because, Tibbs has that reputation. In some ways, I think evidence points to him being a better offensive coach than defensive coach at the end of the day, especially last few seasons.
Yeah.
I think that, it's funny, like in this case, for example, like, and this goes back to the Miami series against Jimmy. The Knicks lost to the Heat a couple years ago. Tibbs coached Jimmy. He loves Jimmy. We know he loves Jimmy. Coached Jimmy in two different places. He has maybe an unhealthy amount of respect for him, so that he is unwilling to switch Smalls onto him. And then when he does get the ball in the post, he sends a lot of help at Jimmy. And I personally sometimes feel like if Jimmy has to work in isolation against a pretty, Deuce is small in stature, but he's a strong dude and he plays hard. And like, if Jimmy has to create with maybe just a little bit of a dig help, but not like sending a double or anything, and has to create, and if Deuce can stay disciplined and not foul, like, isn't that the result that you want here? And like, instead you're playing this like weirdo OG drop. That's like, I mean, you're parting the seas here. Like, it's not a terrible defensive possession, but sometimes it's like the path of least resistance is just to switch it. Okay. And Jimmy post Deuce and see how he does,
Yeah. Sometimes I think these kinds of coverages are kind of overthinking it a little bit, and I think it's also, in a sense, showing your hand way too early. Yeah. It's not a typical coverage you see every day. And I think to test it out in this setting, yeah, I mean, there's value in it, but I think there's some more coverages that you can make use of, or you just go with a typical switch and see how you play off of that.
Yeah, we'll see. Look, the fact that they don't have Brunson to hide helps. I mean, the defense has actually looked very good the last several games. It's you replace Brunson with Deuce in the starting lineup. That's a tremendous defensive upgrade. And you can do more things. Deuce's ball pressure is really good on the perimeter. So we'll see if that makes a difference. But then again, the Warriors can now attack. Steph's going to relentlessly attack cat and drop. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how the Knicks are going to cover that one. Unfortunately, we don't have the film to really check it out, but that's something to look for, is Steph going at cat relentlessly in his drop coverage. Might not be pretty for the Knicks. All right, let's take the last question, Joe.
Go ahead. Quick question about that. Before in Minnesota, they were willing to kind of like soft hedge cat up to the level of the screen. Have the Knicks been as willing to do that?
No. The Knicks went through a stretch, to your point, of them like searching. They went through a stretch of getting aggressive at the level with Cat between games, I would say like 10 and 20 of the season. And then Tibbs has basically abandoned it since. They've gone through some switching depending on the opponent, and Cat has switched a little bit more in the second half of the year. I do not see them switching him out onto Steph, certainly not at the beginning of the game. Like, I do think he'll come out in a drop. They might ask Deuce to start on. We'll see. I think it could go a couple different ways in terms of who matches up on Steph now that Deuce is in the starting lineup. But Mikal, I thought, did actually a pretty good job in this game. I know Steph Steph went off a little bit in the second half, but I thought Mikal did a requisite job on him. So I think they'll rely on their point of attack guys to just get over and hope for the best. And I think they'll keep Cat down. I think one of the reasons Tibbs does that also is because Cat is such a good rebounder, defensive rebounder, and that's really his best defensive strength. And so I think the thought process is, I want to keep him by the rim. I don't want him rotating all around, all the way out. And then I need like Josh Hart to pull down 17 rebounds just to make this team a decent defensive rebounding team. So I think that's one of the reasons behind it, is the rebounding aspect. But my guess will be that you'll see Cat and drop when the game begins.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
All right. So what do we got here? We got a little short action here, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, I chose this one purely out of geeking over one of the better actions they run, and also something to note about how the Knicks defended it. So basically, for the people who don't know, short action is basically, someone comes over to set a high ball screen for Steph, and then Steph passes it to someone on the wing. So in this case, it's Draymond, and he does that in order to create a better passing angle to whoever set the ball screen. In this case, Guy Santos. And it's also a pretty nifty counter to whenever Steph gets doubled, gets two to the ball, which happens pretty much all the time. So, yeah, I mean, passes to Draymond, and then Draymond passes to Guy. And then something to note here too, also, and how the lane was created for Guy. At the same time, Moody is cutting through the lane, cutting along the baseline. So that takes Brunson out of the equation. And also at the same time, on the weak side, you got Buddy on the wing. And OG's like, I can't really help off of Buddy. So that creates the wide open lane for Guy. And yeah, that's just the easiest bucket that you can get off of Steph's gravity.
I enjoyed Brunson's body language on this one. He's like, God, that's easy. Yeah. So what is the way to guard this correctly? So, I mean, it needs to be communicated, right? Hart needs to switch this, and Mikal needs to try his best to stay attached to Santos, right? That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Basically, it's just the communication needs to be on point, near perfect, basically. And it's basically, this is something that's drawn out of ATOs, basically, like Steve Kerr draws us up. They've done this a lot. They've done it as early as the JaVale McGee era. So I don't think this isn't something new that they've run.
And you see Josh Hart's reaction here. Josh Hart's reaction after the play, he's talking to Mikal like, "Hey, man, jumping up and down."
Yeah,
and Mikal actually signaled to his ear. I remember from the game, he signaled to his ear like, "I didn't hear the call." It requires such sharp and quick communication to get that right, because that causes so much panic, right? Like Mikal, the idea of Mikal to switch off of Steph is such a risk.
Yeah.
Because if you don't nail it, it's like he's scared to do that. And that, I mean, you see it over and over again, how other guys get open when Steph's involved in an action because there's so much panic around leaving him open potentially that it opens up other guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way to describe it is you got to be perfect. I mean, there's just no way to defend this unless you have your communication on point. And also, you got to, teams have been really, really physical with Steph as of late, top blocking him, trying to stay in contact with him and like sneakily holding him. I think you got to do that in a possession like this, where you just gotta stay connected to Steph in any way. Like if you're Mikal, and then if you're Mikal and Hart and you're switching, Mikal, like you grab Guy right away. Mm-hmm. Hart, you gotta get a hand on Steph right away around the screen. And
right.
then
there's too much right here where nobody's on him. There's too much space here. Like everyone's got to be tighter.
Yeah. And if you're Mikal, you also got to make sure you not only switch on Guy, you also switch under. You switch. You don't allow him to lane. You don't switch top side.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just a really difficult action to defend if you're not
back maybe and stay in front.
Yeah, I mean,
the Knicks have had an unfortunate amount of these. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you're Brunson, I mean, you just gotta trust your teammates that you're following Moody. You're not committing any mistake or anything like that. So it's really only up to at the point of attack or at the point of the screen where that's the crux of the action. If it falls apart there, then you're basically you're dead.
Yep. There's been an unfortunate amount of these wing to wing miscommunications this season between all three of the wings. Like if the idea of building this team around Cat and Brunson was to have these three switchable wings, that only works if they switch correctly, and they just haven't consistently nailed them. It's been a problem really all year. So not surprising that a team that moves the way the Warriors move and put that pressure on you were so successful in finding a bunch of these cuts and finishes against the Knicks. All right, Joe, this was a blast. Thank you for jumping on, geeking out with me, teaching us about some of the Warriors' actions, the way they like to guard actions, the actions they like to run on offense. It was really a blast. I appreciate you taking the time. Tell the folks at home where they can find you and your work. Your work is brilliant. Joe writes, his articles are brilliant. And his Twitter account is literally one of the best that exist in terms of learning actions, learning movement, understanding what the Warriors are trying to do on a night-to-night basis. So yeah, tell the folks at home where they can find you, Joe.
You can find me at Joe Viray NBA. My Twitter handle is written right there. So give me a follow. And also I write for SB Nation's Golden State of Mind. So just follow my work there. I try to write about every game as much as I can, and trying to write like something subtle and nuanced about every game that not a lot of people may see. I try to focus on that. Really try to educate, and also at the same time trying to learn a lot myself in the process. So it's been really fun to do that, and I appreciate you having me here, because I learn a lot too from these sessions, and it's not every day that I get to kind of chat basketball about someone. So yeah, I really appreciate it, and hope to do this again sometime.
All right, Joe. We'll see you next time. Thanks again.